Hello, this is the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan Kenner, sci-fi and fantasy author. I've got a few things on my plate, as do you, and I want to help you be productive and have a positive mindset as you navigate your passion for writing while managing life's expectations. For more information about the podcast or to access my free guide, How to Have the Most Stellar Writing Sessions, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's dive in. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with another episode of The Casual Author. Today is Friday, January 2025 as I record this, and this is episode number 162 of the podcast. Today I'm excited to say we are talking to KimBoo York about her learned experience of prioritization and just time management over the last number of years since she has been an author. We talk about when she left her job, how she went about doing that, and some of the organizational practices she puts into play when it comes to her author business. She has a history in project management, which I think is amazing. I do not have that, so she has a lot of insight into managing an author business as well as everything else going on in your life. So stick around for that interview. I think you'll really enjoy it. I know I learned a lot from KimBoo. KimBoo was on the podcast last year to talk about her book about discovery writing. I'm also a discovery writer or pantser, so is she. She talks about kind of the magic of that, how to go about doing it, and just some strategies around discovery writing. So we dabble in that just a little bit, but I'll link back to that episode if you want to take a gander at my last conversation with KimBoo. It was very amazing, so I'll leave that there. In terms of updates this week, so we'll start with Homestead as per usual, because I feel like that's, some of you are here just for that update, which if that's why you're here, love it. I appreciate you here to hear about that story. I will say I will have more to say about the Homestead if someday I end up becoming a full-time author and homesteader, but that's in the future. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But no, I appreciate you listening. And for the Homestead update this week, I think the biggest thing was last week I mentioned my family going down to Utah for an archery competition. So I'm happy to report that the competition was very successful. 3 of our sons went and did that, our oldest 3. The first 2 ended up placing. So our oldest son got 2nd place and our third got 3rd place. So very proud of them for that. They did amazing with that competition. The 3rd son, this was his first competition. So he's 8 years old. He's never done it before. I'm very proud of him. He actually shot at twice the distance he's been practicing, just the division he was put in. They didn't shoot at the 10 yards. He had to shoot at the 20 yards. And he did very, very well. He had some ups and downs, but I was watching his score from Idaho, refreshing my screen constantly to see how he was doing, and very proud of him. So it was really great. I know they had a good time. My wife got a little bit of break, but then the Homestead update is I was left alone with the animals and the house. So look, I'm not going to complain for some extra productivity time. I love my kids. I have no complaints. I love when they're around. I did take advantage of the quiet of the house, and I actually hit some author stuff hard. So we'll talk about that later. I'll focus on the Homestead stuff for now. Doing chores entirely by yourself was a lot. I could handle it. I knew I could. I just popped in some podcasts and listened to it the whole time. But I usually just handle, the feeding and the manure management and filling up the waters and making sure all of the cords are not chewed and protected and all the waters aren't frozen. But I was also doing milking on top of it. Now, I haven't milked in a while. It's been a good 6 to 8 months since, well, it hasn't been that long. I think I'm misdilating time here. It's been a number of months. I'll just say that. I can't get pinned the exact time. Regardless, getting back into it was a little bit of a rude awakening. I appreciate my wife and all that she does. My goodness, she has some forearms. Milking, there's 4 different quarters, 4 different teats. We're actually just milking 3 of them now. We dried up the one. If you've been listening for some time, you will have already heard the story of why we dried up one of the sections. But 3 of the sections, milking those out, I'm slower than my wife. I'm just a lot slower. And my forearms, while strong, aren't equipped for that type of movement so constantly. I was sore every time to do it 4 times total. By the 4th time, I had kind of built up some of that strength and it was fine. But that first time, man, my forearms were screaming. And I think more importantly, Lucy was not very patient. She was more patient than I expected. I'll give her that. But when I took an extra 5-10 minutes to milk, she was looking at me. We have the stanchion. If you're watching the video, you'll see my diagram with my hands. So a stanchion is essentially, it's a wooden frame a platform that they climb up on. And there's these two boards that they stick their heads through. And then there's a feeder where you can put like grain or something sweet, some type of treat to entice them to come onto the stanchion. So she climbed up, she got her little bit of grain, lock her head in. That way they can't pull back. If you lock their head in the front of it, they can't pull away. The first time she kind of fought it. But once they're trained, they don't really try to get out. They wait until you open it. So you lock it more as a precaution. But she was shifting as far back and forth as she could. She was trying to kick the bucket. She was trying to step in the bucket. I knew what she was doing. Fortunately, she didn't poop or pee. I hate to say that on the podcast, but she didn't do any of that, which is good. That's harder to deal with. Giant animal. You can imagine the output is very high. She did not do that, fortunately. But she did kick and shuffle. So there were some instances of milk becoming unclean, and we had to give them to the pigs. Obviously, we only want to drink clean milk. So if she kicks something into the bucket, we don't keep it. It's just a safety thing. So pigs got some extra milk a couple times because she did kick stuff in. For the most part, it was very successful. And I just got a good, 3 to 4 hours a day doing chores in the morning and night where I just got to listen. So I caught up on some podcasts and bonded with the animals, you could say. All in all, it was good. It was very successful. And it helps that they trust me. I'm in there all the time, feeding them, petting them, kind of just hanging out with them. So there's a lot of trust there. And, we had to build that trust quite a bit because Lucy does have those horns. I don't know if you've seen the images. If you're following me on social media, she's got these really big pointy horns and makes you a little uncomfortable. When she whips her head around, you want to be out of her way. She's polite though. So it all works out. So that was my experience. That was great. I think I forgot a couple steps a couple of the times. Had to remind myself all the different steps my wife had told me to make sure to do it right, to have clean milk. And all in all, we got it done. So they're back now. Competition was great. Other than that, the other big challenge that we are experiencing is a little bit of our own doing. I don't know that we could have managed it any differently, but as a little bit of a background, I don't know if you recall a couple episodes ago, I was talking about how it was just raining, and the mucky mess inside the pens was wild. Did lots of shoveling, did lots of like drainage redirection of the water that was piling up in this kind of sopping mess of their pen, trying to make it a safe and comfortable place for them. Fortunately, their house was always clean. It was always dry. They had a safe place to sleep. They were happy. But what happened was this mess, every time we tried to kind of smooth it out, shovel it out, there would always be more the next day. And we knew it would come to this, but normally what happens is it goes from kind of drier directly to frozen, and then the snow starts falling. Because we didn't have that bridge, it didn't freeze before all the rain and moisture came. What happened was they walked all over it. They're heavy, so they're putting these pock marks in the ground. And now that it's frozen, it has frozen into this pockmarked holy situation. Now, this isn't dangerous for them. They've got hooves, it's got strong legs. They're both of an age where it won't hurt them to walk on this. Plus, their weight kind of breaks it up a little bit. But I can tell you, when you're pushing a wheelbarrow with 100 pounds or more of waste in it over these pock marks, it's definitely not my favorite thing to do. I can do it, right? I'm strong enough to handle it, but it's one of those things where, you're pushing this thing, you hit one of these holes and stops you abruptly. You have to kind of pull back and push harder, and doing that every few feet is maybe not my favorite thing. So in hindsight, I'm not sure we could have done anything different because every time we tried to keep it smooth, the cows would just walk all over it again. So, we're managing it the way we can. It's not a complaint. It's just something that we've never dealt with. We've been here for 5 years. We've had animals for more than that, 8 years. And this is the first time we're experiencing it. So that's a fun little ditty. I will say that recently, my sons have been appreciating the flow of chores. They get to hang out with me. My second and my third son help me with the cows and the pigs, and we laugh and we have a good time. So all in all, it's a good bonding experience, but things aren't perfect. We'll just leave it at that. Things are never perfect. So in terms of author updates, I am proud to say that my Shopify store is looking really good. So if you've been listening for a while, you'll know that I'm trying to shift my author focus to more direct sales, try to essentially build a business, build a website where I can sell directly to you. What that does is kind of two things. I have the opportunity to sell you new combinations of bundles. So until now, you couldn't buy the trilogy of the Light Bearer Chronicles together, right? Get a discounted price for more than one book. You couldn't buy the Hidden Heritage in a combination. Now you can. So it's just dankennerbooks.com will take you to that site. You can take a look at the discounts there. Now, the discounts are in essence to try to compete with Amazon and or other retailers. But the bright side is if people purchase directly from me, I make more money and you pay either the same price. Sometimes you have to pay slightly more because there is shipping involved. That's just can't avoid shipping if you're paying for Amazon Prime. It's a great service. Um, if people prefer to buy on Amazon, excellent. The support is still there. I'm very grateful for you. But, the shift to direct sales is a big shift. It's taken a lot of work. But there are some, different opportunities for you to purchase my book. So take a look there, dankennerbooks.com. Dwarf Blooded is published. I talked about this, but I'm very proud of that book. It came out exactly the way I wanted it to. The story is very fun. It's a midpoint in the series, so it's book 3 out of 6, and some pretty wild things happen at the end. I think it's a perfect kind of semi-resolution point. There's still a lot of open things, but there's kind of a major resolution that you don't expect halfway through a series. So hopefully that is satisfying and some fun twists that you're not expecting. The one advantage of being a pantser or discovery writer is I am often as surprised as you when I'm writing the book. So it's funny to hear people see people message me say like, I wasn't expecting X or I wasn't expecting Y. And I replied, neither was I, right? I had no idea when I was writing it that that's where this would go, but that's where we are. So that's exciting. Of course, my Ream is up. If you want early access chapters to the current books that I'm publishing, I'm now putting chapters out for Fairy Blooded, which is Jared's perspective. So if you don't know the story, Jared is half fairy, half Samoan. So you can imagine some pretty interesting situations there. He, the way he looks with this bright blonde hair, but Samoan features, it just doesn't necessarily align. He, being a half fairy as a teenage boy, provides some interesting challenges as well. So Fairy Blooded is the story from his perspective. So those are actually probably about half of the chapters are actually already published on Ream. So if you pay just a little bit, it's a couple dollars a month, you can support me. You also get access to not only those chapters, but everything else I've published. So all of the short stories every month up until now, those aren't available anywhere else. So it's very exclusive content series that you can only get there. Now you will get early access to Fairy Blooded, but there's also some physical book perks, you could say, as a part of that. So very excited for that. Take a look at reamstories.com/Dan Kenner. Put that link in the show notes as well. But lastly is the writing. I continue to, I guess you could say, churn out a short story every month. This is no small feat. They are, a good 60 to 80 pages worth of stories formatted. So they're not short. I know I say short story, but they're actually hefty. And there's a lot to them. So this month, I've already talked about it last week. I won't, beat a dead horse, but I'm continuing to write book 6 of The Hidden Heritage. This is Siren Blooded. Had some really great breakthroughs. Now I'm faced with what's next. I have a lot of options, but I'm really facing down the decision of, all right, Dan, what are you going to write next? There's a lot of opportunities, a lot of ideas, and I just have to decide how I want to go about doing it. Which stories to pick next, and if I want to write 2 concurrently, if I just want to go back and forth, or I prefer to have series kind of lined up so that you don't have to wait, because I, most of the time in my series, end the books in a way that makes people want to pull their hair out because they have to wait for the next book. That's just the nature of writing series. That's how you do it, I guess. So most likely whatever I pick, I will just work on one thing. So there's options I'm not going to tell you quite yet because I haven't decided, but that's where I am today. I'm about, probably say 30 to 40% through the final book of The Hidden Heritage. I got to make a decision soon. Let's see, I believe that's everything in terms of updates. So we'll go ahead and shift over to the interview portion with KimBoo. Hey, KimBoo, how are you doing today?
Hey, Dan. Doing pretty good. Like I said, I was talking before we started recording. It's almost noon where I am, so I'm fully awake. I'm ready. I'm trying to be productive. Good to go.
It's a good time before the afternoon nap hits, right? Or you just get tired.
You know me too well. You know me too well, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a little while since we've last talked. You were on the podcast, I believe it was last year, where we talked about pantsing, about your book about pantsing. So really excited to have you here again to talk more about productivity hacks and or productivity things for the kind of the new structure of the podcast. Before we get into that, as an extra reminder for those who don't know you, tell us how you got into writing and how you've made it this far.
So I'm one of those typical stereotypes. I always wanted to be a writer since I was a child. I kind of fell in and out of that vision through my earlier years. There was a lot of trauma, drama, 20s and 30s, how that goes. And I eventually fell into fan fiction at a time in my life when a lot of other things weren't going right for me. And it became very escapist oriented for me, which it is for a lot of people. But it
Mhm.
got me writing again, which was one of the big values that I got out of fan fiction, which wasn't just fandom community and meeting people and enjoying, the properties that I enjoyed, the movies and the books, but just writing every day. And at that point, I believe it was like 2009, a good friend of mine who is also a fan fiction author, she got a contract to have her original work published. And she's like, you should try it. And I was like, oh, okay. And I got a contract for some of my romance books. I got published, eventually moved to being mostly self-published. I'm not against traditional publishing the way some people are, but right now I'm kind of focusing on my career, how I want to build it and publishing books. Some are wide. I've got a pen name that's in KU. So, I just love telling stories and I'm really privileged and grateful to have the opportunity to do that in the world that we live in today and with self-publishing and independent publishing and all the tools that we have available to us. So that's where I come from.
Absolutely. It's a different world than it
Different
was, a long time ago. 20 years ago, publishing looked quite different. So while there's a lot of advantages we have, I will say there's also a lot more things to do, right?
world.
So I think there's because of all the opportunity, it provides somewhat of a challenge to know what to do, how to handle everything. So as a segue into, the topic today, I'd love for you to just give a little bit of an overview of everything that you're doing, because I know you're involved in a lot of things. And this podcast is about authors having a lot of things and how we can unlock our productivity to deal with all of those things. So let's just hear a little bit about what you're working on.
Sure thing. I will start off with the fact that I am a former project manager. I worked in the IT industry. I think we talked a little bit about this on the last podcast, but I did work
We
in the
did, yeah.
IT industry and then I moved into higher education. So I have a lot of experience juggling a lot of different things. Do as I say, don't do as I do, I think is the lesson to take away here.
Yes.
But I do have my fiction writing still. KimBoo York is a fiction author, so got a couple of books coming out this year for that. I'm doing serials. I'm focusing a lot more on serials and serialization, which we might talk about in a little bit, because that requires a different skill set of productivity tools than just writing and then publishing a novel. There's a lot of overlap. I don't want to say that they're completely different things, but for me to focus on my serials requires a kind of a different focus and energy. I've started the draft on Serial Nation Academy, where I'll be doing cohorts, walking people through how to serialize and write serials. That's going to be launching here in a month or so, getting the groundwork laid for that. And yeah, I've got Author Alchemist podcast, which, we talked about. I told you is a little intermittent right now, but with 2026, I'm really focusing, like you, I'm focusing more and more on mindset. I mean, honestly, Dan, there's so many tools out there that can teach you craft. There's so many, and I'm not even getting into AI. I'm just talking about books and websites and classes and courses and cohorts that can walk you through the publishing process, the writing process. To me, a lot of it boils down to mindset and time and attention, which you get out when you're talking about productivity. So yes, I have all of that. I just finished Skeptics Inspirational, which was a 1-year project of daily affirmations. And I have my own spirituality and religious belief. I know you do as well, but I wanted something that was able to fit into the nooks and crannies of people. So it's not specifically religious. It's not specifically non-religious either. It's more of a guide for people to have some daily inspiration for themselves. It's just, there's a little bit of stoicism. There's a little bit of, rugged individualism. There's a little bit of spirituality throughout it. That book's going to be published soon. So yeah, I do have a lot going on. I will admit it.
And it's good. I think a lot of people from the outside looking in are maybe inside looking out, conversely, is you feel like, oh, no one else is experiencing what I'm experiencing. Like I've got a very unique situation, which is true. Everybody, all authors have a very unique situation. But when you get into the actual weeds of it, you realize the human brain split in a million different directions, regardless of who you are and how good you are at handling that, will eventually struggle with that.
Yes.
And it's okay to be like, yeah, there's maybe some things that I can do to account for that. I love that you brought up mindset. And I think it's amazing that you're working on this mindset book. That's so interesting. I guess for you, having from the beginning of your career to where you are today, I know you've gone through lots of different things. You made lots of shifts. I guess what of late has been the most important discovery you've made around how to handle the chaos? Something that you can share.
Ooh, so I think over the last couple of years, actually, what's really helped me is developing what I call my guideposts, and those are an
Okay.
essential part of what I call holistic productivity. So just short version, I do not believe in a work-life balance. I do not believe
Hmm.
that actually exists because work is part of life. Like that whole work-life balance is kind of saying, well, work is something we do over here and life is something we do over here. To me, the work that I do, and I think a lot of writers feel this way, the work I do is part of my identity. It is part of my life. And so what I've developed is this way of creating these buckets that all deserve their own energy and time. And that could be my health and wellness bucket, that I do fitness and go to doctor's appointments and, work on meditation and prayer. It is the writing business bucket. There's the creative writing bucket. There's the relationships and personal life bucket where, I focus on the people in my life, the family I have, and put time for them. And that sounds very simplistic. And I know for a lot of people it is, but the value of it has been for me to see that they all need time and attention. And that if I'm putting too much time and attention into work, and, writing, then my relationships and my wellness might suffer.
Hmm.
And in turn, once those start suffering, they're going to affect my productivity. So there's a certain level of being aware of what you're juggling, but also realizing that it all interacts and interweaves throughout your entire life. So yes, it is a lot to juggle. A lot of projects take different amounts of time, and there are seasons. You have kids. When a child is born, takes a much different type of energy than when a child is getting ready to go to school or starting school or going away to college even or something like that. So everything has its time and its season for energy and focus. Writing takes a different energy and focus than editing, and that takes a different energy and focus than publishing. And so being able to see all of that very clearly has helped me rather than just kind of spinning my wheels going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. That's been my biggest growth over the last couple of years in productivity and working on my business.
Yeah, I think I've come to kind of a similar realization because the term work-life balance is thrown around relatively willy-nilly, and I agree. I think the concept of it might be the right intention. I think when you
Right.
get down
I
to the
agree.
actual crux of it, it's just the reality of life is if you try to put walls between certain things, then they still end up fighting with each other because some things become more demanding at different times.
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing, I like to think of it as like a pool of energy, right?
Mm.
And as I'm doing certain things, I'm drawing from that pool of energy. At some point, I have to replenish it. That's what sleep is. That's what, health and wellness, that's what those things are.
Right.
And different aspects of life will draw from that pool of energy differently depending on what's
Mm-hmm.
happening. But what my job is to recognize when that pool has run dry for that period and be okay with it and be like, okay, I'm recognizing where I am today. I recognize that maybe work has drawn a lot out of this pool today. That's what had to happen, right? There was an emergency or there was things going on. I didn't get to do as much writing as I was hoping. Let's replenish, let's refresh whatever I need to do to get that. And the next time I approach it, I'll do what I can to allow more of that energy to seep towards what I'm hoping to focus on. But I'm not stay here saying I need to do everything. I want to do everything because when that pool runs dry, it's dry. So
I
it's just
love that
like,
metaphor. No, I really love that because the idea that you have only so much energy, and I hate to admit that it's finite, but there's only so much, right? But
mhm,
knowing that sometimes it all affects each other. I think, we're getting at the same point here is that it's all
right,
interconnected. And if you have to spend a long day with a sick child or your cows, like I know you have a few cows,
right.
or something comes up, an emergency comes up, then we haven't wasted that time. That time hasn't been stolen from us. It's just energy we had to put to one thing other than the other. I think a lot of authors get very guilty because they
Hmm.
didn't write today, or they didn't format the book that's supposed to be publishing on this day. And yes, we need to stay on top of those things. But also, yes, kids get sick, animals get sick. I lost my dog earlier this
Mm.
year. She was very old. It was peaceful passing. But it was heartbreaking for me, and it took a lot of emotional
Right.
energy and grief for me. So there was a couple of weeks there I didn't write, hardly did anything at all. We should not feel guilty about things like that. I know we do. It's just our society. It's the work ethic we all have. But we should remember that those parts of our lives are just as important as the writing that we're doing. So I love that idea, the pool of energy that we have to draw from and replenish. That's beautiful.
I honestly like the bucket. I've never really thought about it that way. I am curious to know, is this something that you like physically write down and or plan, or is it just kind of like a concept that mentally you adopt to help you kind of recognize this bucket approach?
I actually have a book called Rise to the Task, and it
Awesome.
is,
Great.
yeah, and it's personal projects management. It's my own system that I developed that uses these tools, and it's the tools that I learned as a project manager. And I think
Hmm.
one of the things, so yes, I do write it down. I have worksheets. I have all of it. It's all in that book. If anybody's interested, it's called Rise to the Task. But the real takeaway that I got from project management is that project management is actually incredibly simple. It's 4 or 5 steps. It's ideation, planning, activation, review. Really, that's what project management is all about. And when I sat down and started thinking about, well, if I'm doing all of these things, how does this fit together in a project management perspective for my personal life as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur, as a creativepreneur, whatever you're going to call it? So I developed this system. And yes, so I write down my 3 to 5 guideposts, depending on the year. I think this year I have 4. And then from there, I look at both the projects and the programs being ongoing projects. Like this podcast would be one of your programs, right? Writing a book is a project because it has a start date and an end date. It's not continually ongoing. So I put all of those things out and then kind of reverse engineer how much time and energy each thing in those buckets. So yes, I do have a complete system that I write down. I write it down at the start of the year for my full year view, figure out what my guideposts are, figure out what my projects and plan and programs are, and then I review it at the start of every quarter. One of the values of the system that I have, I think, with the buckets is that it makes it very easy to say no to things.
Mm.
And that, I think, is the hardest thing of all because we want to do it all. And there's, for instance, a couple of books. I came up with a new idea over the holidays. I watched some stuff and had some ideas, and boy, I really want to write that. But I have to say no to that idea for now. I've put it in the hopper. It's sitting in my to-do list. But I'm in the middle of like 2 ongoing serials. I've got other projects that I'm trying to do. I want to get back to my podcast. So having those guideposts help me figure out, okay, what's really going to get me to my goals? What's going to help me achieve what's important to me? And so that's a reflection that I think is really tough, saying no to things. Nobody wants to say no.
Oh, I'm the same way. It's there's certain things, social media, that I keep
Ah.
going back and forth on. I'm just gonna throw that out there for anybody listening. I'm not against social media. I think it's awesome. For some reason, it and my brain don't jive.
Mm.
Still can't figure out why. But in terms of like goalposts, do you have like a restriction of how many goalposts you can have, or do you just really kind of get a feel for it as you're going through that planning exercise? Just what feels right.
No, I find, and research actually does support this, that having more than 5 or 6 major guideposts in your life becomes unwieldy and just counterproductive.
Mm.
I advise people to stick between 3 and 5. So, and they're the big bucket items. Like if you want to get to college, I would actually call that guidepost education because there's a lot of other things that go into getting a degree or getting a career than just getting a degree. That would be kind of a long-term project under the education guidepost. So I talk a lot about that, but you really do have to be committed and firm with the important things in your life, your relationships, your wellness, your business, your multiple businesses. And it does get complicated when people have, for instance, a day job while they're trying to write. And so, is the day job part of your business side, or is it part of your financial side? You're just doing it to make money. Those are all individual decisions. Like you were talking about earlier, everybody's life is different. They have to make those judgment calls. More than 5 major buckets or guideposts in your life, you're just sabotaging yourself. Again, you got to say no. You got to figure out some things are just not going to happen that year.
Yeah. So I know there's lots of books about this and other recommendations, but I guess for you personally, what helped you get over the hump to start saying no? Right? Because I think saying no is one of the most challenging things for a lot of people. I know for myself as well. Having your goalpost sounds like was very helpful, helping you stay focused. But is there any type of like mindset or emotional shifts that you had to make to be like, no, I can say no. I'm all right with this?
Well, Dan, I hate to say this. I think the best one's getting old.
No, that's fair. It's fine.
But there's a reason for that. And I think one of the things I was not good at when I was young was looking back over the decisions I had made in a more objective way. Like when I was young, I would make a decision about leaving a job. That may have been a good or bad decision, but when I looked and reviewed it, I would be very emotional and just like, yeah, it was a great idea, or no, it was the worst idea. Being able to look at the regrets that we have, not from a place of wallowing in sadness, but from looking at, why do I regret that? What does that represent to me that I didn't do? Why did I say yes to this thing and no to this other thing when it should have been reversed? So being able to look back a little bit and study the decisions I have made make it easier for me now to look at a decision I have to make. My friend Gina and I call it "Don't Put Down the Violin." So this is a little bit of a story.
I love stories.
Yeah, well, you're going to get one. So unfortunately, you're getting the terrible view of my room because my desktop is down right now. And some of it you can see it's a little bit of messy. I was going through things. I was cleaning out a storage closet, which is one of the reasons everything's higgly-piggly behind me. And I pulled out a violin case, and I'm looking at this violin case, and suddenly all these memories come back to me of how I wanted to learn how to play the violin. And this was like in 2007, 2008. So I bought this cheap violin. I think it's made out of balsa wood. It's absolutely terrible, but it was affordable. I could buy it, right? And I started taking some lessons, and I got very frustrated with it. And so I eventually stopped taking the lessons, and I stopped practicing. And then 20 years later, I pull this violin out of a storage closet that I forgot I owned. And I stood there thinking, what if I had stuck with it for the last 20 years? What if I had done that? But to do that, I would have had to say no to other things in my life because of the lessons that cost money. I couldn't go out to dinner with my friend because that's going to be $30, which is half the cost of a violin lesson. And I love going out to dinner with my friend. Now, I love going out to dinner with my friend, but at some point, I would have had to have said no to doing things like that because I wanted to keep playing the violin. And so when I look at those types of things and I think, don't put down the violin, part of the question is, okay, well, what else are you going to put down? Am I going to put down all those dinners out with friends where I'm buying a few drinks and having the appetizer and just spending money left and right and buying a new thing for the gadget for the kitchen when I should have been paying for violin lessons? Having those kind of recollections and looking back on those kind of regrets, not in a self-flagellating way, but in just an observant way, an objective way of saying, well, what would have been the cost of saying yes to the violin? What would I have had to say no to? And would that have been worth it? And that really helps me gauge the decisions I'm making now on what I want to work on and how much energy I want to put into different things in my life.
Do you find you're ever disappointed with your realization?
So
Just
often.
out of curiosity.
So often. So often. And honestly, so I said I got back into publishing or got back into series writing in like 2008, 2009, coming out of fan fiction and getting published. And I think I let a lot of opportunities drop that I should have pursued. I look back and I say, I did not prioritize my writing. I kind of floated on the contracts and some marketing that the publisher did.
All right. So, of all of the goalposts that you have set for the year for this year, what makes you most excited about what you've decided to do?
Focusing on the project I was talking about earlier, well, two things. Because I can never pick one, right?
Yeah, of
Two
course.
things is focusing on kind of my passion project writing. I've spent a lot of time trying to write to market, chasing this trend, that trend, and I've just circled back around to writing what I really love to write and taking the time to find my audience. So, for instance, my serial Dragon's Grail, which is serialized on Substack, that's a story that I've been low key trying to get off the ground now for 10 years. And
Wow.
so having it actually going out and being read and getting to write the continuation of the story of Astra and her two magical dogs, it's been great. It's been lovely. For the business end of it, I'm really excited about Serial Nation Academy, which is something I came up with when I presented at Author Nation. So I presented at Author Nation last year, November. Can't believe that was last year.
Yeah, crazy.
Unserializing. And it was basically an overview. It was like serialization 101 type of thing. But I got a lot of questions about it and a lot of people who wanted to start serializing or writing serials, which are two different things. And I just realized because the changing technology is making it easier for writers to serialize their work and to write long-running serials if they want to, that this is kind of a growing industry in a way. Sure, Wattpad has been around since 2017, and fiction has been writing in serialized format since, I don't know, the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
We've been doing it for a long time. But for a lot of authors, the idea of serializing something online and then publishing it as a book or a volume of a story is still very new to them, and they're still not sure how to do it. They're not sure how to structure their stories. So I'm really excited to share that knowledge because I am very invested in technology around writing. I mean, I am officially a historian of text technology. That's one of my concentrations with my master's degree in library and information studies. So the history of the book and how that's changed and how serials are coming back around and becoming popular again. As you can see, I can talk about it extensively, but
Mm-hmm.
it is, back to the productivity and the goalposts, the guideposts that I have. It is taking up a lot of room. So I'm having to look at other things that, I was mentioning earlier about my Skeptics the daily inspirational that I did last year. I could continue with that project, but no, I'm going to publish the book, call that project done, and move on so that I can focus my energy here on Serial Nation and serving other authors in this very specific niche information aspect of the industry that I think is really being underserved right now as people start exploring it. So I'm pretty excited about it.
And I know I had heard you talk about serialization. I think you had mentioned it on a different podcast, and I was listening to it. I think the concept of serialization is fascinating. I know there was like a Kindle Vella stint that didn't last long. That kind of
No.
got shut down. We won't speak about it. Set it to the side. But I think that there's this recognition that there's this desire for ongoing stories, that there's a lot of readers who thirst for just kind of shorter bits of a story that keeps going and keeps going, and there is an audience for that. But I think the
Yes.
most important story this tells is there's an audience for virtually everything,
Yes.
and it's the hardest part, or the most difficult part, is finding those people. And I don't have a
Yes.
quick fix to solve that problem. That's like an entirely different conversation, but it's great. You found this, you're passionate about it, you're excited about it. The next question is going to be perhaps a little bit challenging, but I'm curious to know what thoughts you have on that. And that is, how do you know, or how did you know when you found the right goalposts? Because I'm sure it has shifted quite a bit over the years. If you look from year one to where you are today, how can you be confident that you found the right goalposts for you at any given time?
Well, that is a challenging question, isn't that? Because, it's easy to say, well, I just vibed, right?
Right, right.
Right. Yeah, it resonated, all those types of words. But again, I think it has to do with having a very firm grasp of what's important to you personally.
Okay.
And so, for instance, I did quit my day job back in late 2021, and that
Hmm.
was a very good job, Dan. It was a great job. It was a fabulous job. I worked with FSU. I was in the higher ed arena. I worked with students with disabilities.
Oh, cool.
It was great. I'd been in that position for 10 years, and I really had a lot of success stories. I loved working with the students. It was a fantastic team in our department of accessibility services. I was working with technology as I was the assistive technology coordinator. So it was really, I was in my zone of genius or whatever you want to call it. But I was also very miserable. So it's easy to look at something like that and say you've got a very good career. And I'm not advising people to just dump your job. Like,
Right.
please, we need to eat, we need a roof over our head. Don't be sensible. But I was lucky to be in a place at that point where I could quit my job. But even if it sounds like a good idea, even if it sounds like a great idea, is it really serving the goals and the focus that I have right now? And let me tell you something, Dan, let me tell you something. As a writer, one of the best questions I ever asked myself was not, where do I want to be in 10 years? Where do I want to be in 5 years? As a writer, the best question I ever asked myself was, what do I want to have had written in 5 years? 5 years from now, when I turn around and look at that little bookshelf behind me, what of my books do I want to see on it?
That's a really cool idea.
And it changed my focus dramatically. Dramatically.
Very interesting. I personally, I don't love the where do I want to be in 5 years because I don't know. Like, to be completely honest with you,
I
but
can dream of things, but
right, dreaming of being a multi-millionaire indie author is, let's look at this with a frank eye and be like, nah, that's not happening.
right.
But the writing question, it's really interesting because you're almost like looking back and kind of accessing that potential regret feeling of if I didn't do XYZ with my writing, would I be like, well, darn, I was really hoping to have done that. So it's kind of interesting, kind of pull that into the present and make use of that so that you find what you want to do. Very interesting perspective. And I knew that was a hard question. I know that it's different for everyone. It's not like there's one magic bullet that's be like, yeah, this solves all the problems. But I think what I've noticed in talking to a lot of authors is there's a lot of these books, podcasts on advice, things telling you this works, do it. And there's just so much. And so authors from a perception perspective say, this works. Like, I'm going to use social media as an example for me. This works. TikTok, you can sell lots of books. You can get out there, right? And for years and years, I was like, I can do this. But every day I was just withering inside and just like my mind was melting and falling apart. It has nothing to do with TikTok itself. It's just like my body is trying to tell me this isn't working for you.
Right.
And so maybe I was ignoring the signs, and there's still that draw to be like, well, this works for other people. Maybe it can work for me. But that's just like, you got to accept, like I said, you just got to know yourself and you have to recognize and be frank and say, this isn't the right goalpost for me.
Exactly.
Right? This is.
Exactly. And the lessons that we've been through, like you with TikTok, honestly, I'm the same with TikTok. Like, I mean, that's not, I enjoyed YouTube. Yeah. But for me, it's not a thing. Bless those who can do it and be successful at it. But yeah, it is a self-awareness and a sense of what are your values and what are your purpose. For me, asking that question of, what do I want to have had written in 5 years? That's really the question that completely changed my perspective, because for me, telling those stories is my priority. And so saying, you should do all of this TikTok stuff wasn't working. Well,
this has been an incredibly enlightening episode, and I'm very grateful for you and your insight that you brought. Since we're running out of time, where can people find more information about you and your books if they want to check them out?
Absolutely. I'm so thrilled to be here. I love talking about productivity and guideposts and all of that stuff. So, not too many people ask me to talk about that, to be honest with you, Dan, so it's a lot of fun. They can find me at houseofyork.info. So that's all one word, houseofyork.info. It has all my different projects, my different pen names, places to find me. You can also find me at scriptorium.kimbooyork.net. That's my blog, but you can find that through House of York as well. I invite people to come and chat with me, talk me up about productivity, and of course my books. I am serializing on Substack right now. I'm looking around at different options for different platforms. That's a whole journey that's going to be happening through 2026 with me. So yeah, come find me. Love to chat about serials and productivity and fantasy and pantsing and all sorts of stuff. I really, really love to talk, as you well know, Dan.
Yeah, and you always are so very insightful. I will put a plug in for your book on pantsing. I loved it. It's called The Secrets of Discovery Writing.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
or let's see, it's By the Seat of Your Pants is the
By the
title of it,
seat of
right?
your
By the
pants.
Seat of Your Pants.
And on serializing, I did write Become an Unstoppable Storyteller, How to Craft a Compelling Serial. So if you are interested in serialization or doing serials online, that's a book you can pick up as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to the next time we have a chance to talk.
Absolutely, Dan. Look forward to it. Thanks for having me on the podcast.